Hello, Professor Pete here. It's lighting and rendering class, week 4. We are almost done our project, so it's time to render. So let's have a look at the settings. So I'm in the render setup, looking at the Arnold renderer. This is basically what we're looking at here is the preview camera all the way down to volume indirect. So I'm just going to go down through the list, and there's also the helper. When you hover over the value, it'll tell you what exactly is happening here. Preview just refers to a number of iterations of samples before you get the final output, and this is really good, especially for preview. So if I turn off preview, it'll just start to render, and it'll just come off as black little pieces. So if I just turn that off here, this is what's going to happen. Moving forward, well, it takes a while, right? Moving forward, we'll look at camera. Camera is more like a multiplier, and so right now it's set to -1 just because I wanted to make it really low-end preview. So as you can see here, the preview is not turned on; it's just going to render straight through. So this took 16 seconds. With preview, it'll just show different iterations as you go. So you'll know ahead of time if your lights are too hot or whatever. Then you can stop the render. So as you can see right now, it's adding more and more detail. I'm going to cancel that there. So right now the camera for anti-aliasing is set to -1. When you're ready to just output your renders, then 5 has been a good number, and it just again multiplies everything by 5. Diffuse is the color, okay, and the ray depth just refers to the number of rays it bounces off itself. So the more higher ray depth of like 2 to 4, the longer it's going to take, and the brighter your shots will be. So diffuse again is mostly for color, and then they have specularity. Transmission is the transparency, more or less. Those are set to 2. Subsurface scattering is usually for skin and some plastics, and then volume indirect is like fog and things like that. So we don't have any of those things in here, and so that's why I just set both of those down to 0. Some things that you can look at too in terms of depth limit. I would leave this at 10. If you increase this goes very slow for your renders. But the ray limit is exactly what it says. It's just the number of depth limits for the number of rays of lights that bounce back and forth. So 10 is a limit for this. Now if you put it 20, you'll notice it gets pretty slow. The other things worth looking at. Clamping AAs, Firefly filtering, it's with your specs. So if you get a lot of these little white dots on your specularity, then you should clamp the anti-aliasing samples. Right, then it'll be set to 5 by default, and that should fix it. It should fix those hot spots that are happening in your specs. Then there's the environment. So I have HDR on mine. And then if you want to set your scene atmosphere, you can also use the same HDR file as the background, depending if you have windows or not. So right there is where you can change the scene atmosphere. And that's pretty much it. If we look at the lights themselves, and I mentioned this in the previous video, the lights themselves also have a number of different things that you can change. And when it comes to rendering samples, as you see here for this light, it's set to 1. Now if you want to have better shadows, this is one place where you could go and change the samples. Change it to 5 and try and see how that looks for samples. But that's pretty much it. That's all I've got for you. Just to show you how long it took me 45 minutes to render this 500 meg scene. So here it is. You can see that there's still some noise, especially in the shadows. So those are things I still need to change these things. And you see there's all sorts of noise on the bricks too. So 45 minutes. That's how long it took for this. I got the increase AA. You can see here too the clamping. It's a little hot on the spec there, and I could try that to maybe reduce it. The other thing I forgot to mention too is under the render setup, under common, make sure that you have the right output size. Right now we're just going to do 2K, 1920 by 1080, and that will be fine for that. So that's it for rendering. It's going to take you a while to render each frame once it's on a high anti-aliasing. Expect render times of 45 minutes even per frame, but that's just the way it is. Hopefully you've tweaked and looked at the image quality before you start doing these high res renders, but expect for that length of time. It's pretty long for sure, just for one frame. So we'll see you in the next video. Professor Pete out.